It's a drug hit.
He had some type of a hazmat suit on.
Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I am your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the LIEDAHO4 case. And, you know, taking a little time off, clearing my mind has really given me clarity. And it's enabled me to take a step back and be able to see things that otherwise I probably wouldn't be able to see because I was what we used to say, I was in the weeds, right? When you're in the weeds, when you're right involved in something and you can only see what you can see, the weeds block everything else out. So when you're in the weeds, it's hard to see the things going on around the weeds. However, once you take a step back and you get out of those weeds, then you can see the big picture. And there's been some developments that have happened here in the last week. And you know, it kind of takes me back. We're going to cover quite a bit in this video, but it takes me back to, I guess it was a month or so ago when I made some suggestions. I said, you know, it just doesn't seem like we're able to win this fight on our own. A lot of us in the community, we kind of go in circles, you know, on things. And what we needed was someone who could assist us, somebody with some clout, so everybody to give me suggestions. Y'all may think I forgot about that. I looked at every suggestion out there and considered them all. And then I said, we need to come up with 3 things that once we find the person with the clout, we can take these 3 things to that could really move things in the proper direction. Because we all know now, especially since they've released 2,300 forensic documents, and not one document showed any culpability of Brian Kohberger. He was excluded from every piece of evidence in the case that they used to exclude all of the other suspects in the case. And once that finally was released and we could go through every one of those documents, and I kind of held my breath till I got to the very end because even though I knew they didn't have anything, I was like, well, have they tried to even, you know, suggest that they have anything? They didn't even suggest that they had anything. It's unbelievable. So we know that an injustice has been done in this case. They forced the kid into agreeing to a plea deal when they had no evidence whatsoever to convict the guy on. So how do we move forward? Well, I came up with those suggestions. And I applaud Birdie, because Birdie came back. He was, I think, one of the only ones that came back and said, well, hey, I've got 3 suggestions. And I looked at his suggestions and I thought, you know what, that's a very valiant effort, but I just don't think those are too general. You know, that's not anything that's going to get us where we need to get as far as really getting the word out. So I've sat back and I've kept my eyes and my ears open and I've looked for opportunities. Because that's what I do. That's what I've done pretty much my entire life. I've kind of held to a few different principles and strategies whenever I'm attacking something. And let me just give you some examples of what I'm talking about. Now, these things I used to identify when I was in a very competitive business world. And the first thing was the old saying that goes along with the word insanity. Now, people will come real fast. Well, that's not really the definition of insanity, Pav. Right, we understand that, but this is an old saying that the definition of insanity is to do the same things over and over and expect different results. And in business, and anytime you're attacking a situation, if you continue to do the same things over and over and think it's going to have a different result, then you are insane. And once you have that ingrained in you, then you can identify when you're doing the same things over and over and you're hoping for a different result. It's never going to come. If you do the same things, the same result will come. So being able to identify that is always going to be key. Then there's luck. And my definition of luck has always been the old definition of luck, especially when it comes to business or any type of endeavor that requires strategy. And luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So if you are always prepared in advance, when opportunity presents itself, since you're already prepared, then you can take advantage of that opportunity. Some people call that luck. Not me. It's when luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And then you can always borrow from, well, the things like I talk about a lot with those Aryan gangs, things that they study. Well, a lot of people study these same principles, and there's always something to take away from them. And I'm referring to The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And when you go to some of the principles from The Art of War, I believe there's several of them that you can use whenever you're on an endeavor to try to be strategic when you're doing things. And number one, laying plans. You need preparation. We've already talked about that. You need foreknowledge, but you also need planning to succeed. You got to minimize the cost of war through efficient and effective campaigns. Leverage your strengths and exploit their weaknesses. Use espionage, both tactically and strategically. Don't rely on brute force. Outsmart the enemy and make every move count. And whenever you're operating under these very well documented to be advantageous principles, then you can move forward in a strategic way that will actually get you the results that you're looking for. With all that being said, now to fight a war in concept, obviously you have to have an enemy that you're fighting against. And I think we can all agree that the enemy in this particular case has been the state of Idaho, law enforcement in general, putting out false narratives, the mainstream morons continuing to put out false narratives and one-sided opinions based on total BS. I mean, not even real facts. I mean, I watched Nancy Grace last night come out talking about how she wished that the prosecutor would go ahead and go to trial and say the plea deal was breached by Kohberger, contesting the restitution, even though it was proven in court that it was all the prosecution's fault on why the defense had to contest the restitution. But it's like a battle. It's like a war against getting the word out, getting the truth out. And it has been you can go on and look at anybody, from coverage of this case that has actually kept an open mind, and they will do video after video about, look at these idiots, what they're saying, their lies. I mean, it's a constant battle. So whenever you're in a constant battle, you're in a constant battle against an enemy, and the enemy has shown itself for a long time in this case. Then I go back to some of the minions out there, and I start to really think about what I've seen in their coverage of this case. And I'll give you a specific one, and that's McDonough. Now, McDonough has been very puzzling to me, and I've brought this up in videos, because he was a one-sided minion throughout the entire process. But the second the plea deal went into effect, I noticed a change in him and what he was talking about as it related to this case. And the main change that I had seen was how they focused most of their attention on WSU. And they began to go through and interview, the chief there at WSU, and they were perplexed how they did not do more once they found the white Elantra, even though law enforcement was very specific about the year models they were looking for. Kohberger's wasn't one of those year models, and therefore with the amount of white Elantras in the area, you wouldn't waste time with model years that didn't meet what the law enforcement was looking for. But they just couldn't get that concept down. In their minds, that didn't mean anything. And then they would attack WSU's credibility in the investigation. And then I seen more videos where they would attack WSU as it relates to they should have known something about Brian Kohlberger before this all took place. And I was perplexed. I was like, how can you believe that the investigation into the case was so poor, yet still believe Brian Kohlberger is guilty? And now it all makes sense. Once you sit back and you look long enough, the truth will reveal itself. Because what has just happened? Well, in the last week, we've heard a lot of rumors about the Gonzalez family maybe filing a lawsuit against WSU. And some of the dollar amounts that have been speculated was upwards of $400 million. Now, I noticed my ally, Kathy at the Indie Zone, who is amazing and does amazing work. She has kept her eyes on the docket and has not seen any kind of suit be filed as of yet. However, I do believe that that suit is either been filed or it's about to be filed, because whenever mainstream moron Enton comes out and confirms something from the families, well, it's usually come true once he has confirmed something from the families. I remember when he confirmed the plea deal from the families, and when we didn't want to believe it, and it turned out it was true. So anytime he talks to the families, it's almost like a strategic mouthpiece for them to come out and say what it is they're going to be doing. And I found that interesting. And once I heard that, I went, now it makes sense why McDonough has been so focused on the shortcomings of WSU. Everything comes full circle. And let's just talk about what Enton said.
Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out my show. I really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. In this episode, the latest on the Brian Kohlberger case, the Gonzalez family is now suing Washington State University. Kaylee Gonzalez, of course, one of the victims from the Brian Kohlberger murders. Brian Kohlberger was attending Washington State University, getting his PhD in criminology, and now Kaylee Gonzalez's family is suing them. There were warning signs that Kohlberger was troubled while he was in college there, but does that rise to the level of a lawsuit? I'm digging into it in this episode of Brian Enton Investigates.
So that lends credibility when I read articles like from the Daily Mail here. Brian Kohlberger's victim's family will sue Idaho murderers college after classmates raised red flags. And the family of one of Brian Kohlberger's victims has revealed plans to sue the college where he was enrolled as a criminology PhD student at the time of the unalivings. Kaylee Gonzalez's parents, Steve and Christy Gonzalez, are filing a tort claim against Washington State University, seeking undisclosed damages, the family's attorney, Shannon Gray, told the Idaho Statesman. In a statement, the Gonzalez family said the suit is about gaining accountability and transparency from WSU, where staff and students had noticed Kohlberger's increasingly alarming and creepy behavior around the time of the quadruple unalivings. Our goal is to understand what went wrong, to ensure that no other family endures the same tragedy, and to honor the memory of those who were lost. We trust the legal process to uncover the truth, the statesman read. Well, I believe what you're really stating here, Shannon, is we want $400 million, and that's what you're really after, not gaining accountability and transparency from WSU. And I believe that is your downfall as it relates to this case, because what you've just done here is created an enemy of WSU, and you gave them 400 million reasons to not want Brian Kohlberger to be convicted of this crime. Let me elaborate. So now that the Gonzalez family has decided to sue WSU, and we believe it's in the tune of $400 million, well, that makes WSU no longer an ally in the entire Brian Kohberger is a lone gunman, Ted Bundy scenario. It now makes them a very staunch adversary, in my humble opinion, because no college is going to want to hand over $400 million and take responsibility for 4 unalivings just because they hired a youngster as a professor. So, what does this mean? Well, most of the time when you file a $400 million lawsuit against an institution like that, you're not actually expecting to receive $400 million. You're expecting them to have fear, and the fear forces them to settle. And in cases like that, they could settle for $40 million and not take a chance on losing, the other $360 million. And I bet that's what likely those families are banking on. However, in doing so, I believe it has opened up a golden opportunity for us who are trying to get the truth out in this case. Because with an adversary that's looking upwards of $400 million to pull out of their till over a lawsuit like this, it actually makes them the most, I don't even know how to say it. It makes them want Brian Kohberger to not be guilty of this crime more than any other person out there that I can think of. And whenever you have a university that's being sued like this, well, you're going to have an insurance company that doesn't want to pay that money out. That insurance company is going to have investigators. You're going to have a team of attorneys that are going to be fighting this suit. They're going to have investigators. So I believe it's created a golden opportunity. So what I plan on doing is sitting back, and once they announce the legal team for WSU, I'm going to do a little digging and figure out who the investigators of that legal team are. And I'm going to say that's our best opportunity for getting the truth out there, is once that legal team and their investigators have been identified, I believe that is the person that really needs to get the 3 pieces of information that we want to get out there to the public, which brings us back to those 3 pieces of strong information that can have a real impact in this case. And it's taken going through all the police reports, the forensic reports, and looking at every available piece of evidence out there for us to really come up with what I believe are the 3 things that somebody, such as investigators in a $400 million lawsuit, could back people in a corner and force them to get on the record and answer some questions, especially as it relates to the investigation in the case. Here are the 3 things that I propose, and I'll be doing videos on these 3 things over the next few days so that everybody's real clear why I suggest these 3 particular things, because these are 3 things that if you corner one of those investigators and make them answer in, say, a deposition, that it's actually going to have some real impact in getting things moving in this case. Let's talk about them. Number 1, the obvious one. Prosecutors and investigators are on the record saying no BK. Didn't have any name for BK, nothing about him till December 19th when they got the IGG back. Yet he's listed on a forensic evidence receipt as a suspect on December 5th. How do you explain that? Number 2, you have 2 officers, Rosie and Tisdale, who wrote in a report that they circled the King Road neighborhood several times that night in the exact same manner as suspect vehicle 1, yet they aren't on any of the camera footage from Linda Lane showing that they made these circles around the neighborhood. How do you explain that? And then my personal favorite, you have Nicholas Mowich and Brent Kopacka, who were both named in police reports as persons of interest. Yet their DNA was never checked against any of the evidence at the crime scene in the case. And we know through their reports that they had DNA samples for Mowich and Kopacka. How do you explain these things? Now, I know a lot of you may say, well, wait a minute, Pava, the roommates are the best way to go. Well, if you listen to all of the statements the roommates gave, most of them were given that had any depth to the questioning were given with their attorneys present. So their attorneys kept them away from any kind of incriminating questions. And then that, along with their, I don't know if it's real stuff, gave them plausible deniability. So being able to focus in on three things that I know we have direct proof of is what I feel to be the best route to go. And over the next few days, I'll do videos on each one of those subjects that I put in the questioning, just so when the time comes, there's plenty of ammunition for those investigators to be able to dig in on. And some people out there may think I'm crazy, and maybe I am, but I'm crazy like a fox. And I've been at this too long to let things just get swept under the rug. So anything that I can do to have an impact in this case, you can bet I'm going to do it. And I see a golden opportunity with this new lawsuit that's been filed to attack. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Post your comments, your thoughts, your criticisms. Till next time, Pavarotti's out.